The scent of damp earth and chlorophyll was Dr. Elara Vance's finest perfume. In the hushed, glass-walled world of the Royal Botanic Gardens at Kew, she was not a socially awkward woman of 27, but a queen, a scholar, a keeper of deadly secrets. Her kingdom was the water lily house, but her true domain lay in the less frequented, heavily locked wing known as the Pharmacopoeia collection. Here, behind panes of reinforced glass, flourished a living library of lethality, a tropa belladonna with its deceptively sweet black berries, the delicate, sinister Conia maculatum, and her current obsession, Aconitum napellus, the queen of poisons. Monkshood, wolfsbane, a creature of breathtaking beauty and brutal efficiency. Its flowers, a hooded, deep indigo, stood in proud spikes, reminiscent of a monastic habit. Elara, her hands sheathed in thick leather gauntlets, carefully adjusted the plant stake, her fingers, usually stained with ink and soil, moving with a reverent precision. She was documenting the subtle variations in the leaf serrations for her forthcoming monograph, a work she hoped would cement her reputation not just as a gardener, but as a scientist. The peace of the morning was shattered by the brisk, official tread of boots on the stone path. A man stood at the entrance to her sanctum, his presence an intrusion of the mundane into the sacred. He was tall and broad-shouldered, clad in a practical but well-tailored coat, his face all sharp angles and guarded resolve. In his eyes, she saw none of the usual glazed boredom men displayed when confronted with her passion. Instead, there was a keen, assessing intelligence. "Dr. Vance?" His voice was a low baritone, cutting through the humid air. "I am she," Elara replied, not putting down her trowel. "This section is restricted. Do you have permission for Director Higgins?" "I have something more compelling," he said, producing a small, leather-wrapped badge from his coat pocket. "John Sterling, Bow Street." Elara's heart gave a single, hard thump against her ribs. The runners. This was not about a misplaced plant. This was about a crime. She carefully laid her tools on the workbench and peeled off her gloves. "How can I assist the principal officer?" Sterling's gaze swept over the collection of poisonous plants, a flicker of unease finally crossing his features. There was a death. 3 nights passed. Lord Ashworth. The name meant nothing to her. She raised an eyebrow, waiting. The official cause, as declared by a hastily paid family physician, was a sudden failure of the heart, Sterling continued, his eyes locked on hers. But the magistrate is not satisfied. The circumstances were peculiar, and the symptoms, as described by a terrified scullery maid who brought his nightly brandy, were dramatic. He paused, choosing his words with the care of a man disassembling a clock. Convulsions, a sensation of choking, though his airways were clear. Tingling and numbness, followed by a violent vomiting, and a distinct bluish pallor to the skin. Elara felt the blood drain from her face. The clinical description was a perfect match for the toxicological profile she had been studying just that morning. Her eyes involuntarily darted towards the Aconitum napellus. Sterling saw the glance. "You know something? Those symptoms," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "They are consistent with aconitine poisoning. Aconitine, the active toxin in monkshood." She gestured to the beautiful, deadly plant beside her. "It is one of the most potent neurotoxins in the natural world. It disrupts the electrical signals in the nerves, leading to paralysis, cardiac arrest, and a truly horrific death. It acts with terrifying speed." Sterling's jaw tightened. "Is it common?" "No. It requires knowledge. Preparation. The root, the most potent part, must be harvested and processed correctly. An amateur would likely poison themselves. This was done by someone who knew what they were doing." A cold dread began to uncoil in her stomach. "Officer Sterling, why are you here?" "At Kew." He reached into an inner pocket and withdrew a small, folded piece of vellum, handling it with extreme care. Using a pair of tweezers from her own bench, he unfolded it. Inside lay a single, crushed, but unmistakable, indigo petal. This was found clutched in Lord Ashworth's hand. Elara's breath hitched. She leaned in, her botanist's eye taking in every detail. The specific shade of blue, the shape of the sepal. It was Aconitum napellus. But not just any. Her fingers, now trembling slightly, went to her ledger. She flipped through the pages of meticulous notes, drawings, and inventory logs. Her entry for the Aconitum napellus, specimen #PIN 734, was precise. 2 flowering spikes observed, one nearing full bloom, the other slightly behind. She looked up at her plant. Only one spike stood in full, glorious, deadly bloom. The other showed a clear, clean cut where a section had been removed, a cut she had attributed to accidental damage during her own maintenance a week ago. A wave of nausea washed over her. It wasn't an accident. Someone had used her plant. Her life's work, her sanctuary, had been weaponized. "It's from here," she said, her voice hollow. "From this exact plant. Someone stole a piece of it and used it to murder a man." Sterling's gaze was grim. "That is my conclusion as well, Dr. Vance. And that is why I need your help. The trail leads to a house party at Blackwood Manor, the country estate of the late Lord Ashworth. His widow, his business partner, his political rivals, and a handful of other guests of note are all in residence, ostensibly to mourn, but in reality, to circle like vultures over his fortune and his parliamentary seat. My help." Elara blinked. "I am a botanist, not a detective. You are the only expert on this poison in the country, according to Director Higgins. You can identify the substance, the method of preparation, and, perhaps, the mind of the person who would choose it. The killer is clever, Dr. Vance. They used a rare poison, hoping it would never be identified. They did not account for you." He took a step closer. "I need you to come to Blackwood Manor, as my associate, to observe, to listen, to use your knowledge to flush out a murderer." The proposal was madness. To walk amongst the aristocracy, a world she had always scorned and avoided, to pretend to be something she was not, all while hunting a killer. But then she looked at the mutilated stem of her monkshood. A violation, a perversion of her science. The killer had not just taken a life. They had defiled her own. She met Sterling's steady gaze, a new, fierce resolve settling in her chest, cold and hard as a seed in winter soil. "Very well, Officer Sterling," she said, her voice regaining its strength. "I will help you find this gardener of death." Blackwood Manor was a hulking silhouette of weathered limestone, its Gothic towers spearing a leaden sky. The journey had been a silent, jostling affair in a closed carriage, the space between Elara and Sterling filled with the weight of their grim purpose. He had briefed her on the players they would encounter, and she had committed the names and faces to memory with the same focus she gave a new species classification. Lady Eleanor Ashworth, the widow, a celebrated beauty known for her sharp wit and considerable debts. Mr. Alastair Finch, Lord Ashworth's business partner, a man whose fortune was inextricably tied to the deceased. Sir Reginald Croft, a political rival from a neighboring constituency. Miss Beatrice Croft, his daughter, a wilting flower of the ton. Mr. Dominic Shaw, a poet and notorious charmer, rumored to have been Lady Ashworth's lover, and a smattering of other minor aristocrats and hangers-on. Elara, now posing as Miss Eleanor Vance, a distant cousin of Sterling's from the country, felt like a transplanted specimen struggling to take root in hostile ground. Her simple, dark wool dress, suitable for a laboratory, was starkly out of place amidst the silks and satins of the other guests gathered in the grand drawing-room for a tense, pre-dinner gathering. The air was thick with the cloying scent of beeswax, hothouse flowers, and unspoken accusations. Sterling moved through the room with an easy grace she hadn't known he possessed, his runner's intensity masked by a veneer of polite society. He was playing his part, and it was her turn. Her first target was the monkshood itself. If the killer had prepared the poison here, they would need a source. Excusing herself from a vapid conversation about the weather, she slipped out into the sprawling gardens. The formal parterres and manicured hedges held little interest. She sought the wilder, more neglected corners, and she found it near the old orangery, a structure of crumbling brick and dirty glass. There, nestled amongst the weeds and shielded by yew hedge, was a patch of Aconitum napellus. It was smaller, less cultivated than her specimens at Kew, but it was the same. The plants showed clear signs of recent harvesting. Several flowering spikes had been cleanly severed. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The evidence was here. The killer had not bothered to source the poison from London when it grew conveniently on the estate, a fact few would know. She bent down, her trained eye scanning the soil. There, partly obscured by a leaf, was a small, discarded scrap of linen, stained a faint, greenish blue. A cloth used to handle the toxic plant? She carefully tucked it into the small pouch at her waist, her hands trembling not with fear, but with the thrill of the hunt. Admiring the weeds? The voice, smooth as honeyed wine, made her jump. She turned to find Mr. Dominic Shaw leaning against the orangery doorway, a sardonic smile playing on his lips. He was handsome in a dissolute way, with dark, curling hair and eyes that missed nothing. "I have an interest in botany," Elara said, striving for a tone of mild amusement. "These are quite striking. Do you know what they are?" "Deadly, I'm told," Shaw said, pushing off the doorway and sauntering closer. He made no move to touch the plants, a fact she noted. "The old gardener warned me away from this corner of the garden. Said even the bees that visit these flowers can produce poisonous honey." He looked at her, his gaze sharp. "You don't seem the type to be frightened by a pretty flower, Miss Vance." "Knowledge is the best antidote to fear, Mr. Shaw," she replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Is it?" he mused. "I find knowledge often inspires it. For instance, knowing that our hostess is on the verge of financial ruin, or that our late host was about to dissolve a very lucrative partnership. That is the kind of knowledge that keeps a man awake at night." He gave her a mocking bow. "Do enjoy your studies." He left her there, her mind racing. Was that a casual observation or a deliberate pointer? Was he the killer, toying with her? Or was he, like her, an observer trying to stir the pot? Dinner was a torturous affair of polished silver and veiled barbs. Elara, seated between a deaf earl and a talkative matron who knew every piece of gossip in 3 counties, felt Sterling's eyes on her from across the table. She gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod towards the gardens. His expression did not change, but she saw the slight tightening of his jaw. Later, under the pretext of retrieving a shawl, Elara found herself in the long gallery, a cavernous room lined with grim-faced Ashworth ancestors. She was studying a particularly dour portrait when a soft sound made her turn. Lady Ashworth stood there, her beauty ethereal in the moonlight streaming through the tall windows. She was pale, her eyes red-rimmed, but her posture was rigid with control. "You are the Bow Street man's cousin, are you not?" she asked, her voice a low, cultured murmur. "I am," Elara said, her guard instantly up. "He asks a great many questions for a man here to pay his respects," Lady Ashworth said, gliding closer. Her gaze fell upon the portrait Elara had been studying. "My husband, a difficult man, ambitious. He made many enemies." She turned her luminous eyes on Elara. "But one does not expect to be murdered in one's own home for it." The bluntness of the statement shocked Elara into silence. "He was clutching something in his hand when he died," Lady Ashworth continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A blue flower petal. The maid saw it before the doctor arrived and tidied up." Her composure finally cracked, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "Find who did this. I do not care for the scandal. I want justice." Before Elara could respond, footsteps echoed in the hall. Lady Ashworth wiped the tear away with a swift, angry gesture, her mask of cool composure slamming back into place. "The bluebell is such a fragile flower, is it not?" she said loudly, for the benefit of whoever was approaching. "It withers so quickly after it is picked." Then she turned and melted back into the shadows. Sterling appeared at the end of the gallery. What did she want? Elara's mind was reeling. The widow knew about the petal. She claimed to want justice, but her words felt like a performance. "She claims she wants us to find the killer, scandal be damned. She confirmed the petal, or she's ensuring we remain on a trail she has laid," Sterling murmured, his eyes following the path the widow had taken. "This web grows more tangled by the hour." The next 2 days were masterclass in tension. Elara and Sterling moved through the house like ghosts, collecting fragments of conversation, observing interactions, and piecing together a mosaic of motive. Elara, using her botanical cover, engaged the staff, learning from a terrified undergardener that Mr. Finch had been asking pointed questions about the blue-flowered weed by the orangery just a week before Lord Ashworth's death. Alastair Finch, the business partner, had motive, a life insurance policy, and full control of a shipping empire now that his partner was gone. From a talkative lady's maid, she heard whispers of violent arguments between Lord Ashworth and Sir Reginald Croft over a proposed canal that would ruin Croft's land. Sir Reginald had threatened Ashworth publicly, and Dominic Shaw, the poet, was not only Lady Ashworth's lover, but was also deeply in debt to moneylenders. Debts a wealthy widow could easily settle. Yet the crucial piece, the method, eluded them. How had the poison been administered? Lord Ashworth's valet was fiercely loyal and had tasted all his food. The brandy decanter in his study, the most likely vector, had been used by others that night with no ill effect. The break came on the third afternoon. During a forced, cheerful picnic by the lake, Elara noticed something. Miss Beatrice Croft, the delicate daughter of Sir Reginald, was sketching. But she wasn't sketching the landscape. She was drawing detailed, accurate botanical illustrations. And tucked into the spine of her book was a pressed indigo flower. Elara's blood ran cold. The wilting flower was a facade. She maneuvered to sit beside the girl. "Your work is exquisite, Miss Croft. The aconitum is particularly well rendered. You know it is poisonous." Beatrice started, a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes before the vacant expression returned. "Oh, is it? I just draw them. Papa points out the pretty ones for me." She gestured vaguely towards her father, who was in a heated discussion with Alastair Finch. It was a lie. The precision in the drawing spoke of deep knowledge. But was she the poisoner or a pawn? Later, searching the library for a book on local flora, a pretext to see if Beatrice had done her research, Elara found something more damning. Tucked behind a volume of Juvenal was a small, leather-bound journal. It was not Beatrice's. It belonged to Alastair Finch. And on a page dated the day before the murder, in a tight, efficient script, was a single, chilling entry. "Prepared the special tincture. Hey, we'll never see it coming. The deal must be sealed." Her breath caught in her throat. This was it. The confession. She had to find Sterling. She found him in the stables, checking the tack on his horse, a place where they could speak without being overheard. "Sterling," she whispered, her voice tight with excitement. "I have it. Finch's journal. He writes of preparing a special tincture the day before the murder. He as good as confesses." Sterling took the journal, his eyes scanning the page. His expression, however, remained grim. "It's too easy, Elara." "Too easy? It's evidence. It's a plant," he said, his voice low and urgent. "Think, a man clever enough to use a rare poison, to leave no obvious trail, would he write down his confession and hide it in a library any guest could access? This feels like someone is trying to frame Finch." The certainty in his voice doused her excitement like cold water. He was right. It reeked of desperation. "Then who?" she asked, frustration mounting. "The method, Elara," he insisted. "We have the what and the where. We have a dozen who's. But we lack the how. The killer's genius was in the delivery. Find that, and we find our murderer." Dejected, Elara returned to the house, her mind a whirlwind. She passed the open door of the billiard room. Inside, Alastair Finch and Dominic Shaw were playing, a cloud of cigar smoke hanging between them. "A shame about the old man," Shaw was saying, chalking his cue. "Though I dare say the brandy in his study will be less bitter now." Finch scowled, lining up a shot. "A poor jest, Shaw. The man is dead." "Indeed. And his taste in brandy died with him. That particular vintage was always too acrid for my palate. He was the only one who could stomach it." The words struck Elara with the force of a physical blow. The brandy. He was the only one who could stomach it. She didn't hear the rest. She turned and ran, not caring for propriety, her skirts clutched in her hands. She found Sterling just entering the main hall. "The brandy," she gasped. "Not the decanter. The glass." His eyes widened in understanding. They rushed to Lord Ashworth's study, a room that had been sealed by Sterling's order. The brandy decanter and a single crystal tumbler sat on a silver tray. The tumbler had been washed, but in the world of botany and poisons, clean was a relative term. Ignoring Sterling's questioning look, Elara took the glass to the window. She pulled a small, silver-mounted lens from her pouch, a botanist's loupe, and examined the rim. And there, trapped in a minute, almost invisible scratch on the crystal's lip, was a tiny, crystalline residue. She carefully scraped it onto a piece of paper. From her pouch, she also retrieved the stained scrap of linen from the garden. Using a drop of water from a carafe on the desk, she performed a crude but effective test, moistening both the residue and the stain. She then took a pin from her hair, a simple iron one, and held it in the flame of the desk lamp until it glowed red. She let it cool slightly, then touched it to the moistened samples. A faint but distinct plume of acrid, white smoke rose from both. The confirmatory test for aconitine. The killer didn't poison the decanter, Elara said, her voice trembling with triumph and horror. They poisoned the glass. They applied the tincture to the rim, knowing only Lord Ashworth used that specific glass for his nightly brandy. The heat from the liquor would have activated it, ensuring a potent, fast-acting dose. The killer didn't need to be a master poisoner, just meticulous. And they had to have access to this room, to his things. Sterling's face was a mask of cold fury and admiration. Ooh! The door to the study creaked open. Sir Reginald Croft stood there, but the blustering country square was gone. In his place stood a man with the cold, calculating eyes of a predator. In his hand, he held a small, elegant pistol. "I rather think you've reached the end of your inquiry," he said, his voice dangerously calm. "Sir Reginald," Sterling said, his own body tensing, subtly shifting to place himself between the baronet and Elara. The grieving friend, or should I say, the desperate father. Desperate? Croft gave a short, bitter laugh. Ashworth was going to ruin me. That canal would have cut straight through the heart of my estate, devaluing my land to worthlessness. I begged him. I threatened him. He laughed. His eyes glinted with a fanatical light. He was not a man to be reasoned with. He had to be removed. And you used your daughter, Elara said, the pieces snapping into place with dreadful clarity. Beatrice. She knows her botany. You had her identify and harvest the monkshood. She made the tincture, didn't she? A father's request. She would never suspect you meant to use it for murder. Beatrice is a talented girl, Croft said, a flicker of something, remorse, pride, in his eyes. Obedient. She simply prepared a special weed killer for her papa. She knows nothing. His gaze hardened. But you two know too much. A tragic accident. A Bow Street runner, overcome by a faulty stove, and his poor cousin with him. The case, already so confusing, will be quietly closed. He raised the pistol. The click of the hammer being cocked was deafening in the silent room. In that frozen second, Elara's eyes darted around, not in panic, but with the analytical focus of a scientist assessing variables. She saw the brandy tray, the carafe, the lamp. The lamp. As Sterling began to speak, a low, distracting monologue, Elara moved with the silent grace she used in her greenhouse. Her hand closed around the heavy, cut-glass carafe. "You won't get away with this, Croft," Sterling was saying. "The magistrate knows I'm here. He knows my suspicions." "Suspicions are not proof," Croft sneered, his aim unwavering on Sterling. Elara swung the carafe. It wasn't aimed at Croft, but the silver brandy tray on the desk beside him. The impact was spectacular. The tray, the decanter, and the glass, the very instrument of the murder, shattered into 1,000 shards with an explosive crash. Croft flinched, his head jerking towards the sudden noise and spray of crystal. It was all the opening Sterling needed. He lunged, not for the gun, but for Croft's arm, slamming it against the heavy oak doorframe. The pistol discharged, the bullet burying itself harmlessly in the ceiling with a roar that echoed through the house. Plaster dust snowed down. The two men grappled, a brutal, short-lived struggle. Sterling, all lean muscle and trained efficiency, quickly overpowered the older, softer Croft, wrenching the pistol from his grasp and twisting his arm behind his back, forcing him to his knees. The door burst open, revealing a stunned crowd of guests and servants, led by a pale-faced Alastair Finch and a wide-eyed Dominic Shaw. "Sir Reginald Croft," Sterling announced, his voice ringing with authority, "I'm arresting you for the murder of Lord Ashworth." He looked at Finch. "Fetch the local constable. Now." As the room erupted in shocked whispers and exclamations, Elara stood amidst the wreckage of the brandy set, her heart pounding, her body trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. Her eyes met Sterling's over the head of the defeated killer. In his gaze, she saw no triumph, only a profound, weary respect. The aftermath was a blur of official statements, tearful confessions from a horrified Beatrice Croft, and the grim satisfaction of a case closed. This special tincture was found hidden in Sir Reginald's dressing case, along with notes in his hand on the timing of the poison's effects, copied from a rare book in the Blackwood Library, a book Beatrice had identified for him. A week later, Elara was back in her sanctuary at Kew. The scent of earth and greenery was a balm. She was repotting a non-poisonous fern, the simple, honest work grounding her. A familiar tread sounded on the path. John Sterling stood there, out of place but not unwelcome. He looked more at ease here now, she thought. "The magistrate is satisfied," he said. "Croft has confessed fully. He acted alone, manipulating his daughter. She is broken, but will not face charges." Elara nodded, wiping her hands on her apron. "Justice is served, though it feels hollow." "It often does," Sterling agreed. He hesitated, then gestured to the Aconitum napellus, which was already showing signs of new growth. "It's still beautiful, even knowing what it can do. That is its most dangerous quality," Elara said softly. "The beauty masks the peril. It is a lesson I will not forget." "Your knowledge was the key, Elara," he said, using her Christian name for the first time. "I would have been chasing shadows without you. You have a singular mind." She felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the hothouse air. "And you have a singular tenacity, John." He smiled, a rare, genuine expression that transformed his severe features. "The Bow Street office could use a consultant on matters of a botanical nature. The world is full of people who would use nature's gifts for ill. We could stop them." Elara looked from his hopeful face to her kingdom of plants, her safe, ordered world. It was no longer enough. The aconite affair had shown her that her knowledge was not just for books and monographs. It was a tool for justice, a light in the dark corners of the world. She picked up a small, potted seedling of a harmless, flowering herb. Time for courage. She handed it to him. "I suppose every garden needs a good watchman," she said, a slow smile gracing her own lips. "When do we begin?"